Hello and welcome to A Tribe Called Health. The Tribe convenes weekly for a roundtable discussion on health, fitness, and sustainable living. We're about to get started, but first, a disclaimer. The information on this broadcast should not be considered medical or legal advice. If you need medical or legal advice, speak to a doctor or a lawyer. If you are a doctor or a lawyer and need health or fitness advice, get in the tribe. On today's show, we welcome Nick, the nutrition nerd Pineault. He's here to talk about the dirty little secrets of the food industry. Set your Google Translator to sexy. The French Canadian is in the house. This is A Tribe Called Health. Hey everyone, this is Joe Rignola of WellnessPunks.com, and with me, as always, Eric Hulse of EricHulse.com.
Hello.
What's up, Eric? And we are missing a tribe member. John is predisposed at the moment, so he's going to miss out on this really awesome show.
He'll be back next time.
Yeah, we totally miss John. I told John I'd pour out a little liquor for him, but I don't want to really waste it. So
no, I'm gonna miss his sexy arms, but they'll be back.
Yeah, his big tattoos and stuff. So what's going on with you, Eric? What's new and exciting?
Nothing. Well, before Joe and I were talking, and Nick, I'm doing functional medicine now, so I'm running labs on people, and I just ran a lab on myself to see if I had any like parasites or fungus or anything going down in the gut area.
It's a poop lab.
Yeah, it's a poop lab. So you basically have to like scoop your poop into these vials, and they go to this lab and they test it for parasites, fungus, or whatever it may be. And I could have swore that I was going to come back with something, but I came back completely parasite-free.
Which I shouldn't be, you're always bragging about how perfect your poo is, though.
I'm just excited because, Nick, just so that you know, I've been on this challenge where I haven't had any alcohol or sugar for the last, it's 45 days and it's going to be 90 days. So now, after the 90 days, I can totally get down.
Mm-hmm.
So excited.
I'd last about 45 minutes on that protocol. Yeah, so especially with my sleep deprivation, the child has us up quite a bit with his teething. So there'll be no cleanses or detoxes or anything like that anytime soon. So anyway, Eric, why don't you introduce our guest?
Studying food nutrition and how they affect our body is his passion, and distilling it down to help people make informed food choices and get in the best shape of their life is his mission. These days, you'll find him writing or reading about nutrition in some park or cafe in Montreal, Quebec, or connecting with other passionate health and fitness experts somewhere on the planet. You could follow him over at his blog, which is Nick Pineault, last name Pineault.com, and consult his latest controversial work, The Truth About Fat-Burning Foods, at thetruthAboutFatBurningFoods.com. Welcome, Nick.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Thanks for being here. It's going to be a good show.
Yeah, so Nick, it was a good bio. I like it.
Yeah, that definitely works. That sounds cool. So Nick, we usually ask folks, how they got started on this journey, where you came from, what were you doing before you got into, you became the nutrition nerd,
Oh man, yeah, that's really, I think, a great story. People always cringe when I talk about that, especially people that care about their health at all. I've always been small. I weigh like 130 pounds these days. I'm 5'4", so in my mind I wanted to get big, right? That's what lean and small guys do. So I ended up following a bodybuilder diet, but really not having a clue about what to eat. So I basically went into this big bulking phase in probably 5 years ago. And yeah, basically eating at my weight, eating like 5,000 calories a day sometimes.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa.
I managed to do
How
that,
did you
and
how did you manage to get all that food in?
I don't
Yeah.
know, drinking like sometimes like 1 liter of orange juice with cheap protein and all sorts of crazy stuff. Anyway, needless to say, I did get big, but actually managed to put on some fat, which is like a miracle with my kind of metabolism at the young age of 22. So what ended up happening, I didn't feel the best way in my entire life, and I started actually, I think it's one documentary. I can't remember which. Might be the one about the guy who eats McDonald's for a couple of months and gets sick, or the one. I can't remember the titles now, but I watched like 10 or 20 of them, and King Corn, all those documentaries that basically made me understand, oh, maybe I don't know anything about how to eat, because the only information or the only education or background I had was TV and magazine, and like the average person on this planet. So needless to say, I was clueless about how to really eat, and I'm really obsessed when it comes to information. I'm from a communication background, so I'm basically a copywriter these days, and starting this business full time really soon. But I wanted to find the truth. So basically, I started being passionate about this stuff and following all sorts of blogs and really reading like probably 40 hours a week as a part-time, like anytime I could get on my hand, I started reading about health, nutrition, and all this stuff. So I'm really self-educated. But what made me the nutrition nerd is really when 6 months ago, I decided to create this product called Truth About Fat Burning Foods. And I just realized that even some health bloggers had really no clue what they were talking about in some sense, because they're just rehashing the same old information from health authorities like Mercola, Chris Kresser, all these authorities put on some information, and then health bloggers years later use the same information, and it's not necessarily the good information, and sometimes it's all too scary. And basically, I was asking myself, like, do these guys even look at the actual research, and do these guys actually care if their information is true or not? And it ends up happening that I discovered that there's as much misinformation on the good side, if you will, where health bloggers try to make people healthy, than on the bad side, where you get all these good big companies, Kellogg's, General Mills, Procter & Gamble, Lextra, Mazento, that try basically to make money and end up screwing people's health. So that's really what made me passionate about this stuff. And then 2 years ago, I decided to make a living out of it, and I really had no idea what to do. Ended up doing some fat loss stuff, and I wasn't really my passion, but ended up discovering, hey, this is about food choices. I like talking about it. People listen to me when I talk about it. I'm passionate, like Eric said, and I think I can really convey a message that people need to take care or to wake up to what's in their food, because we live on a place right now that's not like what it used to be, unfortunately.
What let's talk about some of the subject matter here. I read your 5-minute dietary makeover, which I really enjoyed. In that book, you talk about 4 foods to sort of swap out. One of them is vegetable oil. The other one is bread,
Right.
milk, and meat. So let's go through those and talk about them. What do you have to say about vegetable oil?
Vegetable oil, that's probably the #1 food people still think are healthy. And I mean, just 3 years ago, I still hadn't all this information in mind, and I thought it was healthy too. I mean, you see on the TV, you see the B-cell margarine ads and everything, and it's with the Heart and Stroke Foundation here in Canada, and probably endorsed by the government agencies in the United States. And I mean, Are these guys completely wrong? I think they are. From what I know, just because the main idea is that oils inside plants generally are very fragile, and when you look at the manufacturing processes that use high temperature processing and bleaching and all sorts of stuff that makes it that we can conclude that even the product that's pure and refined and looks good and has no smell, no taste, basically the most stable when it comes to shelf life product ever, the nutrition just isn't there. There's basically nothing that it brings you, and at the same time, there's all this this side that creates inflammatory compounds. And actually, I've only found one study, and that's really an area that I want to study more in the future, how bad these vegetable oils are. But one study in, I think in 93 or 96, made by the Western A. Price, another very controversial health institute, it discovered that even the non-hydrogenated vegetable oils contain up to 5% trans fat, just because the manufacturing process made it so that the omega-6, omega-3, or any trace of nutrition created all those bad compounds. And even if you remove them in some way by sedimentation and filtering, you end up having a dead product with some byproducts in it, toxic byproducts. And so basically it doesn't bring anything good to your body, and it probably contains hidden trans fat. That's not even on the label.
Now, Nick, before you go on to the other food swaps, as the nutrition nerd, are you more concerned with the nutrition, the actual nutrition aspect of the food, or like the big corporations, big pharma kind of thing? Where do you really find your research going? Because when you speak, it's you go to both sides. And you speak about the nutrition and how certain things are harmful for our bodies, but it also seems like you're very passionate about the corporation side, which is a whole other topic. Where do you fall? Where does your passion lie?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. The problem with the like, if you will, the activist side, where you'll actually try to I don't know, change the mentalities around certain companies or boycott and all this stuff. Some people fight for it, and I think it's good. I think consumers should vote with their choices in the grocery store. So let's say that you end up not buying vegetable oil and buy coconut oil. That's probably one more producer that has more money to produce more coconut oil in a sustainable way if you pay the price it really costs. And in the other end, if they see that sales are decreasing for vegetable oil, they will have to adapt. And the food industry, the problem I have with some people on health blogs is when you fall into this mentality of the big conspiracy. And I don't say, I mean, I think a lot of the governments and the big company don't disclose a lot of information, and you only have to read Salt, Sugar, Fat, the new book that was out, I think in February. You really need to read that. That's by the author. I can't remember. It's Michael something. Just look it out on Google. Salt, Sugar, Fat. Basically, this reporter from the United States, one of the best investigative reporter, did a, I think, 3 to 4 year study looking into institutes like the Monell Institute. The Monell Institute in the United States is really the research center on the senses. So the taste, the smell, etc., and really finding the perfect recipe of salt, sugar, and fat to appeal to consumers. So it's not a big conspiracy that these companies are trying to make you unhealthy. They don't want that. Maybe one CEO is hidden in a dark room and wants people to die, but most people are just doing. Yeah, I mean, this idea we have about conspiracy, it's not as simple as that. It's only people doing their job, and CEOs meeting, and they're like, okay, we want to make more money, so we'll add more fat, and people will buy more because we add more vegetable oil. People will think it tastes better, and we'll see an increase on the shelf stability and all this stuff. So decisions.
Nick, when you mention like salt, sugar, fat, and how they're manipulating those things, you're talking about in a way so that people, so it has more of like that addictive quality, so people go out and buy it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
There's something that's called the bliss point that's talked about in great length in the book. The bliss point is the perfect meeting of those three ingredients: sugar, salt, and fat. And the bliss point may happen at a very specific quantity of each. So they discovered, for example, you might have, I don't know, a drink that's sweet in a certain way, and you give it to consumers, to a large panel, 1,000 consumers, and they just find it bland and wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Then you just add half a tablespoon of sugar or half a teaspoon, and then the bliss point happens, and people are raving about it. So it's really it's science. They use this science to create food products and make people addicted. Do they want to kill people? No, they don't want. They want to make money. So that's where we need to come in this open-mindedness that, okay, we shouldn't freak out about it. If I still eat foods I eat today, I won't probably die because we're human. Our human body is really strong. We can eat McDonald's for all our lives and still probably manage to get to 90 in some people, and that's a miracle for an animal. But the thing is, we need to just focus on what we can change and use a step-by-step method. So in a year from now, in 2 years from now, we'll have completely rehauled our nutrition, and 90% of the time we'll eat the right stuff instead of the bad stuff.
Sounds like they're really just trying to recreate bacon. Is really what it's all about.
I like bacon.
Yeah, I mean, salt, sugar, fat, bliss point. I mean, that's bacon. But the author of that book is Michael Moss, by the way. It does sound
Michael Moss, right?
It's an interesting book.
So for our listeners and such, and people out there, in a sense, behind their backs in a way, or behind the scenes, food, particularly junk food, is being manipulated to have a very addictive quality to it. So that's where a lot of the science manipulation comes in, and I'm guessing that is the main topic of the book by Michael Moss.
Yeah, exactly. All the story behind it and everything. It's really a good read because it can be eye-opening for some people that still think that this stuff is just, they're just hippies talking about how the food is bad, but they're not right. I mean, read that book, and then it's only fact. It's only fact. Then you can go back when you read such a book, and I really encourage people to do it as soon as possible.
Nick, are you familiar?
I get called a hippie at least once a week.
Yeah, I've kind of I take that as a compliment at this point.
Or a tree hugger, one of those. Yeah. Totally, I take it as a compliment.
Totally, yeah. Nick, are you familiar with Stéphane Guyenet?
I've heard of the name. I'm not sure what he does.
Yeah, he talks about this a lot, about food palatability and hyperpalatability of food. Stéphane Guyenet, he's got some really interesting research on that topic. But at any rate, let's go on to the next food, because this is one that's you seem to differ a little bit from a lot of the people in sort of this paleo. If talking about guys like Chris Kresser and Rob Wolf and Mark Sisson. So the next food on your list is bread. What do you think about bread?
Yeah, bread. Really, like when it comes to consumer, the first thing they have to do is they always confuse like white bread or brown bread. What's the difference? And oftentimes more the brown breads are probably contain more refined grains. So the first step, I guess, would be to change for whole grains. But again, it could be a problem for most people because it's all about the gluten sensitivity. Most people feel better off when skipping gluten altogether, just because number one, wheat contains more gluten these days thanks to crossbreeding and the industry that wants bread that sticks together well, because gluten is one of the ingredients that helps that. And number two is overall a bad. People don't have gut health as good as Eric Olds. So that's another problem. So,
Right
so
on,
yeah,
right on.
basically, if people have any kind of sensitivity to gluten, I'll recommend them to go gluten-free. But the healthiest bread I can think of is really sprouted grain bread. Just contains less of the problematic compounds and up to 10 times more vitamins, minerals, and less of those phytic acid and anti-nutrients that some people are fearful of, or that just reduce the nutrient content of the bread. So that's probably, and I mean, people were doing it back before Jesus, the sprouting thing, preparing bread. It's really the traditional way, either that or sourdough and breads that are actually fermented, which probably does some of the same benefits.
So I wonder what kind of bread Jesus ate then. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know, but there's the Ezekiel bread brand that says that in the Bible they say like there's really a part they cite where it's like you take those grains, spelt, millet, and wheat or whatever, and you sprout them and then you make bread. So that's the traditional way to do it anyway.
Where do you fall with that, Joe? Are you completely like bread? No, or are you like lenient in?
I have no idea what Jesus ate.
No, I'm not talking about Jesus anymore. I'm talking about you. Like where do you fall in the bread atmosphere?
For me, yeah, I mean, if you don't have that gluten intolerance or gluten sensitivity, obviously celiac disease, sprouted grain bread is going to be a better choice than white bread or wheat bread or even whole grain bread. The sprouted grain still has gluten in it. In fact, they add gluten to it. My understanding is that the sprouted stuff doesn't stick together quite as well, and so they actually add gluten to it. If you read the ingredients on Ezekiel bread, that brand in particular, I'm not sure about other brands, but the Ezekiel bread actually has wheat gluten as an ingredient. So it's still pretty gnarly stuff for people who have a sensitivity to gluten. Yeah, there's going to be slightly more health benefits from it. I don't know if yeah, I guess that's as far as I'll go with it for now.
I think when I think about food, I always try to eat the most nutrient-dense foods possible. And
yeah, that's
so even though bread, some people may be able to handle it better, like the gluten sensitivity or whatnot. Even if I was able to handle it, which I can't because I do have a gluten sensitivity, I don't know if it's something that I would incorporate in my diet, only because I feel anything that I want to eat, I want it to be the most nutrient dense as possible. So I would definitely skip that in favor of like a vegetable or something like that because of its nutrient density.
Yeah, let's dive.
Right.
We can dive into a little bit further because I think it'll be helpful for people. Because yeah, I mean, Eric, you bring up a really good point with nutrient density. I mean, you go from like probably organ meats and healthy fats and muscle meats and down the line fruits, vegetables, things like that. And so if you're focusing on those super nutrient dense foods, by the time you get to any sort of grain, it's like so far down the list. It's really just for an enjoyment factor. But I think what Nick is trying to do here is sort of be that skinny end of the wedge that gets people off of what we call the standard American diet. We call it the standard North American diet of eating just junk food and white pasta and white bread and just really crappy food. That may be a step in the right direction. So I mean, I can definitely appreciate that. But yes, from a nutrient density standpoint, it's so far down the list that I usually don't get to it unless it's just something that I want to enjoy, and maybe I'll have some gluten free.
Totally.
The only other point that I want to make is that there's a sustainability aspect to this too that we could talk about. Whereas yeah, maybe it's healthier, but you're still talking about largely monoculture, depleting the soils. I don't know if it's organic or not, so we may or may not be talking about, excess chemicals and pesticides and runoff and dead zones. I mean, so the list goes on and on. So there are a number of reasons to avoid it, but I think Nick's point in his ebook is that it's about baby steps, and let's at least start somewhere. So
Right.
I think it's a good starting point. Yeah.
One thing I might add, when it comes to eating for nutrient density, the part of my book that's more advanced, because I both have a really simple and advanced concept in there, and the advanced stuff is, for example, let's say that you want to eat nutrient dense, so you include, for example, coconut oil in your diet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you see you're at the health food store and you're not sure what kind to pick. So you see this raw coconut oil, and you probably think, oh yeah, it must be healthier than the non-raw stuff. But it's actually the rawness, if you will, of a coconut oil doesn't matter at all. Just in the transport, coconut oil becomes probably over 130 Fahrenheit from what I've researched. So and it actually isn't damaged by this kind of heat. So it's basically a marketing term. So again, that's the part of my book that goes in deep on what claims can be made, and just understand that, oh, okay, so now I've got my health together, but am I actually getting the nutrition I should be getting from this high-end food, or am I getting scammed? Because even the good companies out there, the organic stuff, some people, even people raising grass-fed beef, try to cut corners and fatten their cattle with grains in the last 2-3 months. And that basically reverses back the entire fatty profile to omega-6 and removes the omega-3, the vitamins, everything. So that's the part where you have to get informed one step further if you're looking into this optimal health, optimal diet.
That's a good segue into. We'll skip number 3 for now and go to number 4. And you talk about the differences between grass-fed meats and confinement, grain-fed. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. The main idea is basically if you ate grains all day, you would be sick. And a good example of this is the average American, because most people eat probably 80% plus grains in their diet without even being aware of it. Just because grains are used for basically any ingredient out there, corn derivative are everywhere, and people just eat so much grains. So the bagel in the morning, and then the sandwich with the 3 slices of bread for dinner, and I don't know, pasta later in the day and stuff like that. So cattle that eat grains end up being sick and having all sides of digestive problem because their diet is too acid. And basically their fatty profile in the end is not what it used to be. So their fatty profile doesn't contain basically a little bit of omega-3, if nothing, inflammatory omega-6, because they're fed with grain that contain a lot of omega-6. So their fat is actually reflecting their diet. So cattle not healthy won't make you a lot healthier. So that's basically the idea. You are what you eat, but going deeper than that, you are what you eats. And that's the thing we really need to understand. That people think, oh, okay, chicken is chicken. Yes, but there are different kind of chicken. Chicken that's allowed to roam around in pastures and eat worms like they're supposed to do. They're basically insectivores, omnivores, are healthier. And when we try, the funny thing is that even people buying grass-fed beef oftentimes don't even know what claims can be made. So, and I mean, I'll probably write a book today in 2013, but in 2 years, regulation will have changed. So the thing is, we need to stay informed on how our food is made, or develop personal relations like we used to do 100 years ago. When you know the manufacturer, what is okay, this guy is feeding his cattle with maybe a little bit of grains, but they're organic or whatever you feel like is okay, and the rest is grass, and the cattle aren't shot with any hormones, antibiotics. There's no pesticides around, so all those questions you want to avoid in regular meat. And what ends up happening, even for let's say pork, latest study by it's a non-profit organization, Consumer Reports, shows that something like 72%, might be more than that, of all pork contains bacteria that's antibiotic resistant, and a lot of it, like 20%, contains dangerous bacteria that could make you sick right off the bat. So if you eat any kind of regular ham or regular cheap meat in the United States, and it's somewhat raw, I mean, you're basically guaranteed to have some problems down the road. So that's terrible, and that's also true for beef. When it comes to grain-fed meat, it's a lot more prone to contamination.
So what should people look out for when they're going to buy meat? If they want to buy the healthiest version, what should somebody go and look for?
Yeah, it's really hard. The best way is to know where it comes from. So if you buy, anyway, I'd recommend, just for sustainability reason, to try to buy locally, because I mean, if I'm here in Quebec and I try to buy grass-fed meat from Australia, that's cool, but it has to. It's at the other side of the planet, so I can find grass-fed meat here, 45-minute drive, and the farmer actually delivers here where I am right now in Sherbrooke. And so having this personal relationship is the best way ever, because you actually know how the beef is raised, how the animal is raised, and you can guarantee that it's healthy. The second best step will be just to get informed. For example, you're into a Whole Foods somewhere and you see grass-fed beef, and you can have like, okay, it comes from Johnny Doe from Arizona, whatever. You can call him up, and people are often uncomfortable to ask questions, but people that raise animals, especially on pastures the old way, that costs more, that's more hassle, so they decided not to feed grains. So now you can ask questions, and they will happily say what kind of practices they have. And if they don't say it, chances are that they're not proud about what kind of stuff they're doing. So it really comes down to being informed. As far as the claims go, I mean, grass-fed isn't regulated. It isn't a governmental regulated term in the United States. I don't think in Canada either. So you can be guaranteed 100% that it hasn't been, let's say, grain finished in the last months. And some manufacturers will do that just because people are chasing money, and sometimes they make just bad choice and choose money instead of caring about people's health. But in the end, you want to look at grass-fed, and the term pasture-raised could be a good indicator that, okay, they are on pasture, so at least it's still good. But the investigation is really important. If you live at a place and plan to live there for a long time, might as well know who's raising healthy animals around, where the farmer markets are, etc., because you can then easily try to deal. Like in the old times, it's really funny because we all come back to what used to work back in the days. You can call up the producer, and oftentimes you can buy in bulk. So you will end up really, I don't pay that much more for my organic grass-fed beef than I would do in a supermarket for the average beef. Of course, you won't beat the prices from like the big special in a red label that's called like $2 per pound of beef or per kilo, whatever. But that's really the cheapest kind. And I mean, sometimes it's really tempting to go there, but if you care about your health, you should invest where it counts, and that's nutrition.
Let's stay on that a little bit longer. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about, so we're talking about beef, we're looking for grass-fed. If we're looking at chicken, pork, we're looking for pasture-raised. What about What about eggs? Is cage free something we should be looking for, organic, or should we be looking for something other than that? And what do those terms mean? What is cage free, free range? What does that even mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of terms, and I mean, it took me a lot of hours. I remember one morning it was I actually didn't want to start researching on eggs because I knew it was this big Pandora's box you don't want to open, and there's all sorts of crazy terms used. The worst term ever is is the United Egg Producers Certified. So you might think, oh, United Egg Producers, that seems good, but it's a voluntary program that's made by the big egg producers that actually permits confining hens in a battery cage less than the size of a piece of paper. So that makes that like an official recommendation. So basically,
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's some states, I guess, but in general, the one you want to look for, again, I'd say organic is good because even like finding real pasture-raised chicken that's not given any grain is really, really hard. So if they have to be grain-fed, might as well be organic. A lot of people like me prefer avoiding GMO grains and pesticides in grains. So organic and pasture-raised, again, the term isn't regulated, but if you find that at least the hen are spending some time in the sunshine, some time outside when it's possible, and the idea, they just have to be healthy. So think about like, okay, is it healthier to confine them in a small cage the size of a piece of paper and they can barely walk, if at all, or they can move around inside? Okay, that's a start. Then they can move around outside, and you have different levels of healthiness for your hens. And again, I'm not the chicken expert, but that's just like common sense, right? So another funny thing is the cage free. The cage freeze basically just says, okay, they're not in a cage, but oftentimes they have these big warehouses or barns that are filled with chicken. And oftentimes, like you see the video from Greenpeace and all this stuff, that's scary, but it's true. Some manufacturers cram chicken like probably 3 layers high in some sense. Like they are just crammed in there for some time, and of course they're stressed, they're less healthy, it's in the dark and everything. So cage-free can still be that. Again, some manufacturers will use cage-free and really have the highest quality chicken out there. So it's not 100% true all the time. So you have to get informed. The one thing I don't like seeing on eggs is the added omega-3. And let me say why. Oftentimes, the added omega-3 is in the form of flax. And flax is a grain that goes bad or goes rancid really quickly. So you might actually have rancid fats inside your chicken, which is probably doesn't make them any healthier, just makes a good-looking claim. The number 2 is that flax contains the omega-3 ALA. And ALA from the plant-based ALA is actually absorbed in your body probably, from what I have, is 800 to 3,300% less absorbable than EPA and DHA from animal-based fats. So in the end, you have this egg, and you say, okay, I have my omega-3 for the day, but your body only absorbs a small fraction of it. So you might be thinking that you have enough omega-3 and skip, let's say, supplementation or healthy fish or other sources of omega-3. But in the end, it's basically worthless. This claim is basically worthless, added omega-3 at all.
Very interesting. So finally on your list is milk. Yeah. Where should we be consuming it or not, or what?
Yeah, good question. Milk. A lot of people are passionate about milk. I mean, it's part of the daily American breakfast cereal, and we have all those big conglomerates saying to us, "So drink more milk." Got Milk, right? The big campaign with all those superstars in the United States. In Quebec is you should drink like twice as much milk. So it's always about drinking more. Are you getting enough? And it's always based around calcium. So the one thing, let's say like number one thing is drink at least organic milk. First of all, especially if you live in the United States, like probably a lot of your listeners are. In the United States, you've got this hormone RBGH that's used for milk production. The cheapest milk you'll find contains RBGH, but really any milk that doesn't state does not contain hormones does contain them just by default. Always 100% true, because it increases the production of dairy cattle by a lot. So it's really cost effective. The thing is, this hormone increases the hormone IGF-1 levels in the milk by at least 6-fold. So it's proven this great amount of IGF-1 is proven to increase risks of cancer and probably also disrupt your gut health in some way. So, and now I'm not even talking about the fact that the cheap milk is probably raised on cattle fed grains, so they're not healthy. And then I mean, each year more shots of antibiotics are given to animals than to human beings. So 15 million pounds of antibiotics are given to grain-fed cattle each year in a preventive manner because it's not regulated. So they're giving these antibiotics to the cattle, and what ends up happening is that you have traces of them in your diet. So maybe you drink one source of antibiotic milk isn't a problem, but when you stack them up, it's when you have problems, and it's always your gut health that suffers. So I drink organic milk. That being said, number two, you need to look at, do you actually tolerate milk? That's the big question, because a lot of people don't. 60% of all adults don't have the necessary enzymes, and it's really a genetic thing, probably paired with some of your gut health genetic. That's really worse and worse as the generations goes. They can digest milk properly. So when you can digest milk, when you can digest the food properly, you end up being a lot of times having a leaky gut, and which means that your intestine wall gets spaced out. Instead of being really clumped together and blocking foods, it's spaced out. So you have particles of certain foods leaching in your bloodstream. So if it's milk, you'll actually become more and more allergic to milk each and every time you drink it. And that's just a cycle. That's why we see these big numbers like, allergies have doubled in the last years and stuff like that. People intestinal walls are really screwed up, and what ends up happening is that people drink milk and get more inflammation in their body and bad digestion, and for people it might be skin problems, mucus buildup. So if you drink organic milk, to me that means that you have at least thought about the fact you might be allergic in some way, and you have at least tested it out. So you remove milk from your diet at all for 1-2 weeks, and then you add it back. Let's say you drink 3, 4, 5 glasses of milk in a single day, and then you check out how you feel. And if you really feel terrible, then you know, okay, I need to either remove it from my diet or really manage the way I do it, and understand, okay, this food might give me side effects because it's not as healthy as all those big marketing campaigns put it, really.
You might have mentioned this. I had to step away to plug my computer in. What are your thoughts on raw milk?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite parts. And everything I've learned about raw milk really comes from Chris Kresser. He had that really awesome article where he speaks about basically he crunches the number of people who got sick from raw milk compared to other types of foods, and that's really interesting. I'll talk about that just in a few, but the baseline is that when we look at raw milk nutrition, you're talking about nutrient density. Raw milk contains 66% more vitamins, contains CLA, that's the natural trans fat that actually fat burner to some degree, protects from cancer. So really healthy fats in there. So it's probably a healthier product, a more complete protein. You've got enzymes, probiotics, all sorts of beneficial bacteria in there. Probably a healthier and more nutrient-dense product than pasteurized milk. Then it's probably easier to digest because it actually contains the right blend of enzymes to digest it. So in nature, just a couple of decades back, pasteurization wasn't invented, and we didn't have to deal with all this hard to digest milk that is pasteurized dairy. So now people, and I know in the United States they're still sending the SWAT team to get the milk producers these days. So it's all in the news. But as far as
is it regulated in Canada? Like, can you get raw milk?
You can't. You can't, except when you're a nutrition nerd and know people personally.
Oh, snap.
Oh, yeah. But you can talk about it that much. Yes, it's this big taboo when you try to get a healthy food, but it's like dangerous. People aren't sure about it. And the number of intoxication, that's really funny because in my book, I crunched some number based on Chris Kresser stuff. And you see like the yearly cases of foodborne illnesses. Let's say for produce, you have 4 times more illnesses that comes from produce than dairy. So should you fear your broccoli, right? And then seafood. Some people, oh yeah, I'm eating shrimp at the local restaurant. 29 times more illnesses related to seafood than dairy. And eggs, beef, pork, poultry, all these are more likely to get you sick than raw milk. So I really don't see the point of being that afraid of raw milk in that sense. Whatever the government says, and of course it needs to be not heavily regulated, but the people serving raw milk have to follow strict guidelines because yes, you can get sick, and yes, you can get pretty sick if you keep your raw milk, let's say it's just been extracted and you keep it under the sun. But that's just people who produce raw milk would have to just care about people's health. That's the same thing, let's say, that a restaurant serving raw beef in a tartare. So, I mean, you have the responsibility to make sure people aren't going to die from your healthy food. So that's really, if people have access to raw milk locally, legally, because I can't talk about the illegal stuff in a public.
We cover ourselves with a disclaimer on the front.
Yeah, exactly. That's a disclaimer. But if you have access to raw milk, try it. And if you're really worried about it, go meet the producer again, and you'll see if producer use clean methods, there won't be any problem for your health. And a lot of people can't tolerate pasteurized dairy, but can when it comes to raw milk. And I mean, it's not only in the United States that people are starting to get aware of that stuff. Even like in Greece and all those European countries, they've been drinking raw milk forever, and they're probably laughing in some sense at the Americans being scared about it. Like, what's the big deal? But that's just cultural, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's worth it to reiterate that point. If you are going to try raw milk, that you should absolutely know who your farmer is and
Right.
do some investigation there and make sure that it's the source is clean and healthy, and you're on your own with that.
So Nick,
So-
Joe, you want to go ahead?
No, go for it, Eric. Yeah.
You dispelled quite a few myths here, and you educated our listeners on quite a few things. Why don't you talk a little bit about your book, The Truth About Fat Burning Foods, a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'll make that quick because I think my fiance waits on me for supper.
Oh, what did she cook? What she made?
What's for dinner?
What she made?
We're doing red Thai curry with chicken and coconut milk, and it's one of my favorites. So yeah, I can't wait. But let me talk about my product because I'm really passionate about this one. I mean, I've spent 5 months writing it's not even my full job now. Now that we talk in May, will be pretty soon, but it was a long struggle. But I think the information in there is basically, if you like what I talk about in this podcast, it's really probably 5 pages in the book in some sense, because it's what I've done is that I took each and every ingredient, so legumes and bread, pasta, and all this stuff, and I try to dispel myths and just give clear guidelines on how to eat them. So, for example, how you should prepare your rice. There are certain components in rice you want to get rid of just by rinsing it. So really simple things, simple tweaks you can do to your healthy foods that will increase the nutrient density. So let's say soaking nuts and stuff like that. And also what kind of claims you need to look for. So it's a guide on how to eat, how to shop, and even how to manage your mindset around food. So I've got basically 7 components in there, and the product should be, I can't promise anything, but it should be, it's released actually tomorrow as we speak, should be around $27. So I think it's pretty affordable for most people. I've got component number 1 is the truth about protein, fat, and carbs. So that's really the big guy of the entire product, where I talk about all kinds of myths. Everything you've heard in there is taken directly from the book, from my research, but it goes in deep, and you get thousands of small paragraphs that just sum up the information. You get clear guidelines, and you can just skim through it and still get great value. So the simplicity of it all, and the layer I've made it so that it's not black text on white paper. It's really image-based, infographics-based, really easy to understand. And people who read it, I've heard that term over and over again. It's a children's book for adults. So it's that easy to understand.
And Nick, if I could cut in for a second, your first product, the Healthy or Not, was like visually, it was awesome. Like I teach little kids. I could show your book, Healthy or Not, to a kid, and they would totally get it. The way you have it outlined and the infographics, it's awesome. It's really great. The way you have it that way.
Thanks. I appreciate it, and that's the goal. I had in mind that all this information. I mean, I was thinking about my fiance in some sense, because she doesn't care about this stuff, but maybe she still wants the information. She doesn't want to spend all those hours in the mornings reading on health blogs. That's my passion. That's not the passion of everyone else, and certainly not the passion of someone eating a standard American diet right now. So I had to make the information really simple. So, and I wanted to make it extensive at the same time. So number 2, I've got the condiments, snacks, and seasonings. So I talk about the stuff in your pantry that maybe, okay, it's just soy sauce, but what kind of soy sauce should you buy? And what kind of guacamole should you prepare? Some recipes in there. The truth about drinks, component number 3, I talk about vitamin water, all those new fancy drinks on the market, and ask the question, are they healthy or not? A lot of them are not, actually. Superfoods guide, truth about superfoods, where I talk about some superfoods that matter and all the magic around some superfoods on the market, and should you buy into this or not? The truth about supplements, I felt like a lot of people use supplements that are really worthless and even dangerous. So really my recommendations are in there. I only recommend 2 companies right there right now, but a lot of companies are legit. The only thing is that most consumers don't have the time or willpower to make their own research and actually identify what supplements company are actually legit and care about the ingredients. The 4-step diet makeover is really about implementation. Like, you don't have time to cook, there's a chapter on that. You freak out because you find yourself, I don't know, you want junk food all the time, but no, junk food isn't good, so you feel guilty. I've got you covered. So it's really about implementation, mindset, lifestyle, and then the truth about your grocery cart is really about shopping for food. So some recommendation to cut on costs, where you should buy your food, and a lot of recommendation when it comes to certain brands I recommend. So that's really the product. I've tried to. That's my best attempt at making something complete, but I'm sure it will be improved in the future.
It really sounds like it's geared towards people who are right now following the standard American diet, but deep down they really want to change, but they
Right.
don't want that complete shock into bam, like purely paleo or purely whatever
Right.
it is. It's
Right.
kind of teaching them their way out in a
Exactly.
very healthy, simple to follow way.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you're, whether you're just looking, you're listening to health blogs and sometimes feel like, oh, maybe I should up on something as extreme as paleo, but I know that, my lifestyle is in paleo. I've got those business meetings where I'll need to eat at a restaurant anyway, and you feel like this is too extreme for you. My approach is really, paleo is the end of it all, and there are a lot of good stuff in there, but maybe you need to start taking baby steps and learning each and every chapter. You'll learn new stuff, new ingredient, and really take one new ingredient every week, and in a week from now you'll eat 52 different new foods, and your entire fridge and pantry will be rehauled. And trust me, your health will be completely different, and the promise of the product, fat burning, you'll automatically be leaner just because you change the way you eat. And then if you want to look into exercise and other stuff that might make you leaner, good for you. But yeah, and if you're advanced and wondering if this is for you, I've connected with several professionals, all the other business owners writing about health, nutrition, personal trainers, transformation coaches, strength coaches, doctors, all sorts of people. I've all found this valuable because they learned stuff, just because it's this big, huge amount of information that I've distilled down to the essential. So even if you're pretty advanced, check it out. And if you realize that you already knew all that stuff, first of all, congratulations, because you know a lot of things. And second, just ask me for a refund. I'll gladly refund. If you don't learn anything, I don't want any of your money, but I'm sure it will be valuable for basically anyone. I wish, at least.
They're just gonna want to stare at it all day and upgrade it. That's all.
Yeah, it sounds like a really awesome product. It's really practical and easy to implement. So just remind people once again where they could find out more info about you and your product.
Sure. If you want to grab the product, you can do so at the link truthaboutfatburningfoods.com/Eric. So that's a link for that I set up to basically thank you guys for having me on this show. So I really appreciate it. So truthaboutfatburningfoods.com/Eric, ERIC. And if you want to learn more about me, about what I do, I'm starting a complete rehaul of the information I put out on the internet. I'll start videos very soon. NickPineault.com, so NickPineault, and say that with a French accent, and you'll love it.
Now, Nick,
Awesome.
Before you go, you mentioned in the very beginning stuff about artificial sweeteners, and I wasn't exactly sure where your stance was on that, because I know that on its own could be a very controversial topic. Where is your stance on that, and is there something in your book that talks about that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people are confused about, and they're not exactly sure where to go with that.
Sure. I talk about artificial sweeteners, and the focus on the entire book is somewhat on fat loss. So when it comes to weight loss, the actual studies out there show that most artificial sweeteners, whether it's aspartame or sucralose or all of those, show that they probably make you gain as much as sugar, just because they use different pathways in your body. You can't trick your body that much. That's basically the thing. I think personally that the manufacturers, the researchers around artificial sweeteners wanted to do good and wanted to make a big buck, but they failed. And I really don't recommend people to use artificial sweeteners to replace sugar. I don't think they're really healthier. What I recommend instead is probably sugar alcohols, but even then, you don't want to be consuming I don't know, huge amounts of xylitol or erythritol every day, because your body, like you talk about nutrient density sooner, it doesn't contain any nutrient, and it basically teaches your taste buds to crave the sugary stuff. So even it doesn't contain calories, even if that's not that manageable to your body, you have to retrain your taste buds to stop wanting to have sugar instead, this sugary taste inside every food. So in the end, just to sum it up, artificial sweeteners, you can use some. They probably won't kill you, but it's really not something I'd recommend to anyone.
Right on, right on.
Right on. Good stuff. Excellent show, Nick. Thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with us and giving us the scoop on your new book. What's the old book again? Healthy or Not?
Yeah, it's Healthy or Not.
Cool.
Don't
Sounds like a good one too.
Yeah, I tell people the URL, but I really don't want people to buy it because this one is really really more expensive and a better value for your money. So just
Cool.
go with the new version, really.
Awesome. Cool deal. Well, thanks again, man, and we hopefully we'll have you back on before too long.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thanks.
All right,
have a good
man.
night.
We'll talk to you soon.
Later.